Hello everyone, my name is Erin O'Hara. My presentation will be on the Great Basin hunter-gatherers, specifically the Stillwater Marsh Archaeological Site and its people. So the Stillwater Marsh Archaeological Site, what is it? It is an archaeological site or locality that was located or is located in the Carson Sink in western Nevada, United States, and in general it covers an area of about 16 miles. It was after a heavy season of heavy flooding between 1982 and about 1986 when several human remains were unearthed by the floods. In general, more than 4,000 human remains have since been collected and 144 burials have been officially recorded. Overall, almost 500 individuals have been estimated to be there, with about 140 of those skeletons being relatively or like almost complete, so little missing parts here and there. The skeletons found in Stillwater Marsh did not come from one singular population, which is important to note, but rather from several different hunter-gatherer groups who resided in the area over the course of between like 5,000 and 3,000 years ago. Before I continue speaking, I would like to show you this little video of what the Stillwater Marsh looks like currently. Obviously, it doesn't reflect what it looked like 3,000 years ago, but it'll give you a nice little visual to have in your mind while I continue speaking. All right, thank you. Sorry if you can hear the audio in the background. It was just some music playing, so nothing that you missed. So the significance of this archaeological site, why is it significant? So obviously it gave a look into several different hunter-gatherer groups in one singular area and just provided archaeologists and bioarchaeologists abundant amounts of samples and evidence to create more well-rounded views about not only hunter-gatherer groups in the Great Basin, but just hunter-gatherer groups in general. It just provided like an exceptional opportunity to learn about like daily life, the diets, diseases, trauma, etc. about Great Basin hunter-gatherers through the reflection of their remains. So let's dive into the big portion, my thesis, and what this is all about. In general, there's often a debate in the anthropology/archaeology world whether hunter-gatherer groups, such as those found in the Great Basin, showed signs of being one of the first prosperous societies or lived like short, strenuous existences. The Stillwater Marsh Archaeological Site, in my opinion, provides evidence that prehistoric hunter-gatherer groups did not have to live this hand-to-mouth life. Through bone and tooth analysis, as well as food and overall resources in the Great Basin area, we can see that this hunter-gatherer group had a varied diet that most likely went beyond the minimal nutritional needs. Flora and fauna resources. So the current flora and fauna of the area in combination with the fauna found in the Stillwater area shows that a variety of plant and animal resources were available to the prehistoric inhabitants of the region. That, like I mentioned, it went beyond the nutritional needs. So the Stillwater Marsh contains a number of diverse and useful plants such as bulrush, cattail, pickleweed, nutgrass, spikebrush, and sedge, um, where it's believed that the seeds and roots of these plants were probably used for food. And furthermore, experimental data obtained through archaeological investigation showed that bulrush seeds, which are ready to harvest around the late summertime, would have been particularly important. And if you look down, I included a couple pictures of the plants that I just mentioned. So I have bulrush on the left, two pictures of that, one in bloom and one on when it's not in bloom. Nutgrass, sedge, pickleweed, spikebrush. I did not include a picture of cattail. For those of you who might know, cattail and bulrush look very similar to one another. So if you wanted like a little representation of that, look to bulrush. There are differences, however, but I'm not going to get into those right now. So the marsh, in addition to the plants, is also home to more than 160 species of water birds. Birds such as mallards, pintails, cinnamon tea, redhead, canvasbacks, and especially coots were found to be the most abundant. I'm not using their scientific names, just their general names or well-known names to just make it a little easier. So continuing, nearly all of these species of waterfowl found in the Stillwater Marsh are migratory birds or migratory birds, in which they are most plentiful in the spring and fall, such as the mallards. However, some species remain in the marsh year-round and don't migrate. If you look down, like the plants, I also included a couple pictures of the different waterfowl species. As you can tell, these are all different species of ducks, which are very abundant in the marsh. So, continuing, various small mammals, including muskrats and other rodents, also inhabit the marsh and the surrounding foothills and like the uplands of the area. So, two of the more important small mammals would have been jackrabbits and ground squirrels, which I included some photos of beneath. They would have been hunted around the early spring. However, rodents and other small game, such as the ground squirrel and jackrabbits, could be caught from the fall through the late winter if the people needed to, so food supplies got scarce. In addition to what was located directly in the marsh or just like the surrounding foothills, the Stillwater people went as far as to hunt into the Stillwater Mountains, where a major faunal resource was bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep were usually hunted in the fall, although a shortage like what they would do with small mammals could push people to hunt sheep at any time of the year. It's important to note also that bighorn sheep would provide the group with many resources in addition to just their meat, so they were very highly sought after, I guess you could say, but hard to obtain. And again, I included a little picture beneath. So, although the Stillwater people can be seen to have just like a large variety of food, like I previously mentioned and showed, the vast majority of their diet we see was made up by fish, actually. So the marsh supports three major fish species, the Tahoe sucker, the Lahontan redside, and the tuachub, which is the most abundant. So analysis of the fish remains from Stillwater provides evidence that tuachub were a major food resource to inhabitants of the Stillwater Marsh. The first remains, which were found in the Stillwater Archaeological Site, represent over 85% of the identified vertebrate faunal remains. So it's like just a huge amount of the vertebrate remains that were collected that belong to specific fish species. Sampling that was conducted of the faunal skeletal collection suggests that over 290,000 fish remains were recovered during excavation in only like a small fraction of the site, so not even in the entirety of the archaeological site. So due to this, the sampling and analysis of the fish remains suggests that hundreds of thousands of small tuachub reside in the archaeological deposit. In addition to the remains of these fish found in the archaeological site, remains of these fish were also found in human coprolites from the Hidden and Lovelock caves, which are just other archaeological sites in the surrounding areas of Stillwater Marsh. Such abundance of skeletal evidence supports the claim that small tuachub were a key resource to prehistoric inhabitants of not only the Stillwater Marsh, but of Western Great Basin hunters, hunter-gatherers in general. So what does this mean? Why is it important? So in general, based upon the vast amounts of plants and animal resources available to the people of this area at varying times of the year, as I mentioned, it could be greatly assumed that these resources did indeed provide the necessary amounts of nutrients to the Stillwater people, if not more. So these just vast amounts of food resources were readily available to be obtained. So moving on, although we can see that this hunter-gatherer group had an abundant source of their food, looking at the remains will provide us with just information needed to tell if they were able to actually obtain that food. So the prehistoric people's diets and nutritional levels can be reconstructed through bone analysis in several different ways. The number of bones that were found at the Stillwater Marsh, just in general, provided archaeologists with ample amounts of samples to reconstruct this. So from the skeletal remains, evidence was found of iron deficiency anemia in the Stillwater people. For those of you who don't know, iron is just like an essential mineral needed to maintain adequate transportation of oxygen and red blood cells. Iron is often acquired through eating red meats, at least that's how most of us acquire it, but if one had a lack of red meat, like chronic diarrhea or a parasite, they could show signs of anemia. When the iron is limited in the body attempts to produce more red blood cells in the bone marrow cavities, These cavities would then enlarge and could result in a spongy appearance of the skull or eye sockets, which is called parotid hyperptosis or Creeper hyperptosis. Parotid hyperptosis is when it's on the skull, and then Creeper is when it's around the eye sockets. And if you look below, I included a couple images. So on the left is an image of a little, red blood cells transporting some oxygen. So think of it about, the red blood cells transporting the truck of oxygen, and the iron is the wheels that are, a very important part of that transportation. And then moving towards the right, we have some red blood cells being created in the bone marrow, and then also an example of parotid hyperptosis. So what does this mean and what does this tell us? So although there was evidence of iron deficiency in the Stillwater people, it was only found in about 4 burials. So because of this, it couldn't be assumed that the Stillwater people were lacking in the foods needed to provide the necessary amount of iron, but rather these few cases were most likely caused by a parasite or like a chronic illness. In addition to the reconstruction of ancient diets, can also be done by analyzing the stable carbon and nitrogen isotopes that are also are often preserved in bone. Plants take in different amounts of carbon and nitrogen through photosynthesis, and they create different isotopic ratios in various plants. Human bones would then reflect the isotopic ratios that one ingested, or the different isotopic ratios of the plant that one ingested during their life. Archaeologists and chemists and bioarchaeologists can then analyze the bone's isotopic composition to determine which plants a person did or did not eat. And if you look below, I put the isotopic composition of rice, and then an image of somebody eating that rice. And then when said person does die, if that person, consistently or often ate rice in their life, that isotopic ratio would be present in their bones. So, the bone samples of Stillwater Marsh, along with plant species and animal remains, were submitted to Margaret Schoeninger, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing that right, who was an analyst of bone chemistry. So Schoeninger then took the analysis results and compared them to 2 other hunter-gatherer groups, one from New Mexico and the other from Ontario, Canada. So the group from New Mexico was found to be more plant-dominant, particularly maize-dependent or corn, while the group from Ontario was found to have almost no plants in their diet. So when comparing the isotopic results, I'm getting ahead of myself, but when comparing those 2 people or 2 groups to the Stillwater people fell in between the 2 extreme sides of the spectrum and are found to have a more mixed, balanced diet. So what it means and the importance. Like I said, the Stillwater people then fell between the 2 sides of the spectrum, showing that they had a balanced mixture of plants and animals. Having a balanced diet makes it easier to obtain the necessary nutrients needed, and in general, it should provide solid evidence that the Stillwater people had that varied diet and gave them the nutrients necessary to survive. In addition to bone analysis, one can determine a person's diet and nutritional levels through dental examination. Archaeologists and other scientists have collected this information in the past through the examination of enamel hypoplasias. Enamel hypoplasias is a form of growth arrest that occurs when someone in their childhood has become severely ill or malnourished. If someone during this time of tooth formation, in which tooth formation usually is between the ages 0 and 6, if that in between that time someone does become ill or malnourished, the growth of the tooth will stop. If the child recovers from their ailment and the growth will begin again. But this growth arrest will be coded as a shallow groove that is visible on the teeth or on the tooth surface. Many of the adults of the Stillwater people were documented to have enamel hypoplasias. The Stillwater people didn't show many signs of trauma or disease, so the likely conclusion is that many of the Stillwater people did experience malnutrition in their childhood. However, that being said, it is important to note that due to the fact that these were adult teeth being examined, we can see that these children, even though they were once deprived of the necessary food needed, they did live to adulthood, and these periods of malnutrition were quickly overcome. So even though at times we can see the Stillwater people faced fluctuating food supplies, due to the many of those who lived to adulthood, we can see that this period was not insurmountable. So my conclusion, just in general, overall, through the vast amounts of floral and faunal food resources, as well as bone and tooth analysis, We can conclude that the Stillwater people were a hunter-gatherer group that, even though may have faced difficult times with fluctuating food supply, overall they were able to maintain a varied diet and attain the necessary nutrients needed to survive.